So the summer after my senior year of high school, I was dating this girl who I really liked. We had a great summer together, but we knew it couldn't last because she was going to be in Colorado. I was going to be going to college in Chicago. So at the end of the summer, we broke the thing off on good terms, and I went off to school, kind of bummed to be leaving that behind. But it all kind of changed when I got into my first class on my first day, and in walks this beautiful, interesting, fascinating girl. And then some stuff happened, some other stuff happened. Eventually we got married. And looking back on it, it's one of those things where I say, I'm really glad circumstances forced me out of the situation I was in and into something new and unknown, because the greatest relationship of my life came out of it. And likewise, in Acts chapter 8, we're looking at a set of circumstances where the church is kind of forced out of their birthplace, their home turf of Jerusalem, because Stephen got executed in kind of a mockery of justice, and now this Saul guy is going around rounding people up. And so they're forced to go do something different, but what comes out of it is fantastic and new. So we're going to be in Acts chapter 8, verses 4 through 8. Take a second to read it if you want to. If not, here we go. I'm Matt Whitman. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Verse 4. Those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Now this word scattered is the same Greek word that was used to describe the scattering of the Jewish people that had happened at the hands of, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks under Alexander, then the Greek generals who came after him, and then I suppose also in a way the Romans who came after, though they didn't really scatter the Jews. The point is, the Jews have been spread all over the classical Eastern Mediterranean world, and there are different pockets of Judaism that have arisen. There's kind of Babylonian Judaism, and there's Asian Greekish Judaism, and there's Judea Judaism, and there's Egyptian Judaism, and they all look a little bit different and have a different feel. But the sense that would come with this word is that through victimization, the Jewish people were scattered, but now God's people reside in all these other places where they wouldn't have either. So it's kind of a bittersweet term that Luke is employing here to the Jewish audience. It's very interesting that he would co-opt this term and apply it to these Christians, because what he's hinting at is that the Christians are now the victims, but that they will benefit, and that they, as God's people as well, will now grow and prosper and expand as a result of a similar treatment, ironically being dealt out to them by the very people who were scattered before as God's chosen people. The original audience definitely would have caught this language, and Luke was intentionally using it to make a point. In the same way that if I were to say to you, politically I aspire for optimism and to mix things up, well, that language that I picked doesn't really mean anything. But if I say hope and change, you know what that means. Acts 1:8 has often been used as kind of a metaphor or instructive verse for what Christians need to do as they tell other people about the gospel. The thinking goes like this. You should start by telling people like in your hometown, and then after that would be Jerusalem, and then after that you got Judea and Samaria, and that's like your state or your region, and then after that you should go to the ends of the earth, like overseas with the gospel. And all of those things are good and make sense if you're a Christian, but I'm really not sure that that's the point of what's going on here in the book of Acts. I'm not sure it is prescriptive first and foremost. And part of the reason for that is I think the metaphor kind of breaks down. First of all, Jerusalem wasn't really these people's hometown. They were all from way up north in Galilee. So here we're talking to Jews, but Jews from a slightly different cultural background. Judea and Samaria would have been more like their hometown. They would have been talking to Jews like them from a similar cultural background as them. And Samaria, I guess, would more account for people who were similar culturally, but are viewed as schismatics or heretics, people who didn't quite get Judaism right. The metaphor gets way different when you think about that third point, to go to the ends of the earth. Nobody in this time went to the ends of the earth and made big, long journeys overseas, except for powerful political people and merchants. So this would have been a completely foreign concept, and it really would have been a foreign concept to say, hey, let's take a religion that grew up with our language in our part of the world and go and try and export that and translate that to people who speak a completely different language on another continent. This kind of missionary mentality didn't exist on planet Earth prior to what we're seeing right here. So my point is this. I think what we're getting here is more of a theology lesson than an instructive lesson for how to do church and missions in the future. Missions should just be common sense. If you really believe that you have the message of life from our Maker, you'd want to tell other people. And if you really care about other people, you wouldn't want to just tell people who live right next to you, you'd want to tell people all over the place. There's plenty of other justification for doing that, but I really think this principle is telling us more about God's redemptive plan. His plan was to take the gospel and put it right in front of his chosen people first in a way that they would get. Then his plan was to take that further out and even reach out to people who were kind of on the margins of his chosen people and of Judaism. But ultimately, his plan all along, even going all the way back to the deal he made with Abraham, was that this thing was going to be for everybody. And we've been anticipating this as we work through the Bible for that much stuff. And now here we finally are. We're just about to see the message of God's grace and redemption go out to the larger world. Verse 5, Philip went down to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the Christ there. So Samaria and Philip come up in this thing, and I got to talk about both in order for it to make sense. Samaria is this region that's like the town next to the town that you live in that no one likes and that everyone spits whenever its name comes up. That place. Nobody likes Samaria. They were already weird in their relationship with Judah. By the time 722 rolls around, that's when the Assyrians came in and conquered everybody in the north. And the Samaritans kind of made some deals with the Assyrians and intermarried. And so the Jews really didn't like them for that. And the Samaritans from this time forward are kind of viewed as half Jews who sort of get it, but they're kind of schismatic outsiders who nobody likes. So it's really telling that the first place that the gospel goes outside of a strictly Jewish audience is to these people. We know that the people of Samaria were looking for a Messiah, and we also know from history that they have kind of their own version of the Pentateuch, and they still believed in the God of Abraham. But the gal at the well in John chapter 4 indicates to Jesus that they're looking forward to a Messiah. And so there's enough overlap here that they should have been ready for the message of Jesus to arrive. And interestingly, it's these weird schismatic heretics who we're going to see are more quick to respond to the message of the Messiah than the people who believe themselves to be right in the main center channel of the will of God and right religious beliefs. Last time we had interaction with these people was in Luke chapter 9, right at the end. You can go look at that for yourself if you want. Jesus comes by a Samaritan village and has been going village to village teaching, and it's been pretty impressive, but they decide to take a pass. They view him as still being maybe a little too Jewish. So you'd think, oh, hey, well, the Samaritans rejected him, the Jews rejected him, but interestingly, the Samaritans are going to respond when they're given a second chance. Philip could be one of two people. He might be the same guy that Jesus called in John 1:43. It might be a different guy who is a newer convert who is made into a deacon at the same time that Stephen was. Could be either. Different church historians and different church traditions view this one differently. You can look up information on that. Everybody can still be a Christian and think whatever they want about whichever Philip this was. For our purposes, what we need to know is that this guy probably had Greek connections and could not wait to get cracking as soon as he had the opportunity to get out of Jerusalem and get to work. He's the first guy to say, hey, bummer, the Jerusalem thing didn't work out. It's all right, we're not done here, guys. And so he goes to a place that had long been associated with a rejection of all things Jewish and starts with them. Verse 6, when the crowds heard Philip and saw the miraculous signs he did, they all paid close attention to what he said. Again, these people who theoretically should not get this right are suddenly getting this right. They're demonstrating reason where God's chosen people did not demonstrate reason. Well, I mean, miraculous things are happening. That should be a clue. When the laws of time and space are broken in front of your very eyes and you see it for yourself, reasonable people should say, something's going on here and I need to take this seriously. But back in Jerusalem, the religious leaders were so dug into protecting their power and position that even though they knew that God was at work and miraculous things were happening, they still refused to acknowledge it or cooperate with what God was doing. So props to the Samaritans, I guess. With shrieks, evil spirits came out of many, and many paralytics and cripples were healed. This sounds a lot like the description of the kingdom of God that Jesus read from the scroll of Isaiah in Luke chapter 4. You know, people who are deaf are going to be able to hear. The blind people are going to be able to see. The people who can't walk are going to be able to walk. There's this day of liberation. And this is what Jesus was saying at the end of his ministry that he wanted to happen for Jerusalem. He loved those people. He wanted to gather them together and care for them. But instead, wow, they take a pass on it. And instead, the hated, dirty Samaritans are the ones who are so quick to receive this blessing. Verse 8. So there was great joy in that city. Well, of course there was great joy in that city. When you love people who have huge afflictions and then those afflictions are dealt with, it tends to make you happy. And on top of that, when even if your religion isn't perfect, you're still basically a people who are oriented to believing that God isn't done with you and he's going to come and redeem your mess. And then you see what looks like God starting to redeem your mess, you're going to get pretty excited. These are a bunch of people who I bet right in this moment are going from disappointment and hoping that God is still there and still interested to excitement and knowing that God is indeed here and is indeed interested.